Hello guys and welcome to Planetside 2, the new free-to-play MMO-FPS from Sony Online Entertainment. So what makes this game different from every other FPS out on the market right now? Well, the MMO part should give it away slightly. Planetside 2 features a fully persistent online battle which never ends between three different warring factions: the Terran Republic, the Vanu Sovereignty and the New Conglomerate. When you log into the game you can choose to fight for any of these three different factions, all of which have their own unique weapons, vehicles and various gameplay quirks. But the thing that really makes it stand out from the competition, and the fact that there is nothing else quite like it, is just the sheer scale of the combat in this game. There are 6,000 players per server. Each server has 3 continents currently, and you can have up to 2,000 players on each continent at any one time. That is a maximum of around 660 odd players per side on each continent, which makes the battles absolutely ridiculous in their size. And this scale brings in some really solid squad and platoon level tactics which just haven't been seen in other online multiplayer games. The closest comparison you can really make with this is the original Planetside, released in 2003, or more recently perhaps Battlefield 3, the 64 player conquest servers. But again, Planetside 2 just dwarfs the scale of that in comparison. Okay, so if you haven't heard of Planetside 2, now you know what it is, and let's take a look at how it plays. So, at a high level, Planetside 2 is a game about controlling territory. You want to control as much territory for your faction as possible, as this gives you resources to spawn additional tanks, aircraft and various infantry equipment. Each continent in the game is divided up into a number of territories that you can capture. And the way the capturing works is similar to, again, Battlefield 3, a kind of resource ticker system. So when you go into a territory, there will be a number of capture points depending on how big the territory is and what structures are there, ranging from one capture point from small outposts to up to 3 or 4 for large facilities. Now these capture points work on a tug-of-war principle. So if there's only one point, then if you control that point, then a ticker will slowly tick up, and at 100% your faction will own the territory. Where this system gets interesting, however, is when there are multiple capture points and all 3 empires are fighting for the territory. Now how this works is, again, is the same tug-of-war system, but you have to make sure you have the majority of the influence exerted on the points. And what this means is if there are 3 points, if you capture all 3, then you'll have the majority of the influence. However, if you own 1 point and the enemy owns the other 2, but you have lots of people around your point, then you will also probably have the most influence. This is because each point can have a maximum number of players around it that exert their influence over the point. This is shown in your UI above the points. It will have like 1 out of 2, 2 out of 2, 0 out of 2. Some points allow up to 6 player characters to exert influence on it. This is really, really critical, and I see a lot of people kind of getting very confused about this, is that the more people you have around the points that you own, the quicker the base will cap in your favour. Another factor in the capping speed of a base is the amount of friendly territory your empire owns adjacent to the territory you are trying to capture. This will affect the capture speed rather significantly, and it also forms the backbone of the game's metagame, which we'll talk about now. So that's how you capture territory, but how do you capture an entire continent for your faction? Well, that's where the metagame comes in. As mentioned previously, you need adjoining friendly territory to the territory you're currently in order to capture it faster. What this also means is that you need adjoining friendly territory to capture new territory at all. This is absolutely key for the metagame, as it forces kind of a combined front to move forward across the map, capturing territory in sequence and slowly pushing the enemy back. This system also adds a lot of strategic depth for commanders, as they can see what territory they own, what territory they're exerting influence on, which can be capturable, and what territory enemies could possibly attack to cut off territory from your empire. If territory gets cut off from your empire, i.e. has no connecting territories back to your faction's warp gate, then you actually lose resources generated by that territory, and it makes recapturing very, very difficult, as it's very slow when not connected to any adjoining territory. So what happens when your faction captures every single territory square on the map? Well, at the moment very little actually. You get a 10% reduction in cost for a specific resource. It'll either be air resources, tanks, or inventory consumables, depending on the continent that you've captured for your faction. Now this is kind of a preliminary measure, I suppose, as when new continents are finally introduced to the game, you will be able to lock a certain continent to your faction, which means that you have conquered it and the enemy can no longer contest it. This is how it was in the original Planetside. However, in Planetside 2, because there are only 3 continents thus far, that mechanic wouldn't really work so well at the moment. But as soon as they add more, I'm sure they'll bring this mechanic back to make continent capture a more worthy mechanic. As it stands right now in the game, the biggest motivating factor to capture a continent is actually just your faction pride. It's interesting looking at it actually. In the original Planetside and in Planetside 2, the faction loyalty kind of dynamic between players is very, very strong. There's always a lot of heated debate, shall we say, going on about which faction is the best on the server, and there's a lot of kind of masculinity going on, I suppose you could say. Which brings me neatly onto my next point actually. I see a lot of people complaining that the game has no story and that all you do is capture territory and then move on, and then it gets retaken while you're sleeping and you have to do it all over again, and that it's just repetitive and it's the same. And I wanted to comment on this because I think it's an interesting observation in that a multiplayer first-person shooter has no story. I don't think I've ever seen that people complain about that before. And I think it's because there's a lot of perhaps MMO players, MMO-RPG should I say, players coming into Planetside because they saw the word MMO on it and they were expecting perhaps something a bit different to what it is. And while it is true that the backstories for each faction is fairly loose, you get a general kind of sense of what they're about. The new conglomerate are kind of freedom fighters, the Terran Republic are kind of totalitarian government forces, and the VS are kind of these transhuman technology worshippers. And that's all you really get from the game. It doesn't give you any more than that really. But I'd say that the stories of the game are what the players make it. Really, this game is a team game, it's a strategic game, and it's all about playing with your friends. This is something else I wanted to talk about, is that this game, don't do this by the way. This game really, I mean, you can play it solo and it's fun if you just want to run around and shoot some guys, you know, that works. But you're really, really missing the point of the entire game. As soon as you join a squad with some friends or join an outfit and join a platoon, it becomes a different game entirely. And honestly, the biggest single piece of advice I can give if you're going to try Planetside 2 is find a group of people to play with. The game it's night and day, the difference. It's actually amazing how it changes. And the stories become how we defended this base when our territory was completely cut off and we had absolutely no chance, but we managed it in the end. And when we were down to our last man, the cavalry came over the hill in the form of, you know, 10 galaxy dropships from our faction's warp gate and saved our asses right at the last second. And that's the story of the game right there, what the players have created. There's no NPCs in this game, there's no mobs, there's no grinding for experience or anything like that. It's just your faction fighting the enemy faction, and that is where the storylines are created. Okay, so let's talk briefly about graphics and kind of game performance. It's actually mind-blowing to me that you can have so many players on a continent all fighting a single battle and it still looks this good. It's actually insane. Again, it's one of those things where you've never seen anything like it, and it's really hard to kind of decide if the game performs well because there's really nothing to compare it to on the same scale. And I've seen the argument that, oh, Battlefield runs at 60 FPS, this only runs at 25, what the hell, SOE, LOL. And I don't think that's really a fair comparison, because in Battlefield you haven't got 400 people duking it out in an area, you've got 64 maximum. And even then they're kind of spread out across the entire map. In Planetside 2, on a regular basis you have battles with hundreds of people on each side, all fighting in the same area. The fact that it runs at all is, quite frankly, a technical marvel, and I think SOE should be congratulated on just getting this thing to work at all. It's quite amazing. With that being said, performance is an issue for a lot of people. I'm not saying it isn't. Me myself, I'm on My computer's getting on a little bit now. I've got a GTX 460 in here with 6 GB of memory and an i7, 3 GHz i7. And I had a lot of problems early on in beta and in launch, just trying to get the game to run at a stable frame rate. I had everything on low settings. I knocked the draw distance down very low, and I managed to get a decent frame rate that way. However, then I started playing with the render quality slider in the graphics options menu, and it's night and day the difference in frame rate you'll get from lowering that to 90% rather than 100. I mean, I'm talking literally 20 to 30 frame rate difference. And as you can see from all the footage I've recorded for you guys in this video, the game looks fantastic even on this older hardware and runs very acceptably. I'm really happy with the performance now. Let's also talk a bit about the monetization system of the game, shall we? Like I mentioned in the intro, this game is free to play. You can download it right now, absolutely free, no strings attached, and get straight into the action. Now the game has a cash shop. You can buy station cash from Sony, which are used in all of Sony Online Entertainment's games. Look at this guy going for the knife kill. Unlucky there, son. Yeah, so cash shop. Yeah, you buy station cash. With station cash you can buy weapons and cosmetics. Now don't freak out when I say weapons. I know it's really fun to jump on the pay to win bandwagon, but it's just not the case in this game. In my opinion, of course. So you can buy weapons with station cash. You can also buy weapons with certifications, which you just earn naturally in the game from getting experience of any kind. Every 250 experience you gain a cert point. Now weapons are on the very expensive side of the cert point acquisition method, ranging from anywhere between 250 certs for the very cheap weapons all the way up to 1000 certs for the more expensive guns. Of course, more often than not, the most expensive ones are usually the most useful, with the cheapest ones being things like burst fire versions of regular guns and things like that. Now it's probably worth mentioning that in order to save up 1000 certs, you're going to have to be playing for a very long time. Just from personal experience, I can play, if I spent an entire evening playing the game, perhaps 2-3 hours, I could probably rack up about, I don't know, maybe 100 certs in that time, maybe just shy of it. So you're probably looking at maybe, if you play perhaps an hour or two a night, you'll probably rack up 1000 certs in about 2 weeks, or something around that kind of ballpark figure. So, but again, it's just a lot easier to pay station cash for it. If you're paying station cash, you're generally paying about anywhere from £2 to £7 for a gun. And again, you're just paying for the convenience of having it unlocked quickly. And these guns are not any better than any of the default guns you get. In fact, the default guns you get for all the Empires are actually very good. They're very versatile in most situations. Most of the weapons you can unlock just have things like very specialised functions, things like burst fire, things like special ammo types which are not available on the default guns, different attachments which aren't available on the default guns, so you're buying specialisation rather than power. I think that's a very important distinction to make. Now there are perhaps a couple of arguable exceptions to this. Things like the rocket pods for the strike fighters are generally considered to be very powerful right now, depending on where you go. Some people may even call them overpowered. And things like the second burster for the max units. The bursters are an anti-air cannon. When you create your account, you only have one burster, but you can buy one for your second arm with obviously certs or station cash. Generally 2 is much better than 1, right? So in situations like that, I guess it's your call really whether you want to call that pay to win if you buy a second one, or just buy it with certs. I find that generally I like to spend my certs on things other than weapon unlocks because the weapons are so expensive with the certs. So I haven't really talked about certs, but they're used to customise your class and buy just about everything in the game that you can't buy with station cash, which is things like all the actual in-game performance upgrades. So things like extra health for your soldier, you can only buy with certs, you cannot buy that with station cash. Things like explosion resistance, upgraded repair tools for the engineers, upgraded medical tools for the medic class, all this stuff, all the certifications for all the vehicles, which gives you like increased reload time and extra ammo and all that kind of stuff. It's all cert based, and it's all designed to have you slowly upgrade your favourite playstyle over time. And again, you cannot buy any of that stuff with station cash. So what else is there to say about Planetside 2? Well, it's really nice to see a PC-specific first-person shooter. I mean, you always see the arguments on the internet these days that you know, developers always have to make concessions to consoles when they bring shooters out. So it's really nice to see a PC-specific first-person shooter that doesn't cater to any other device or console or control scheme or anything. This is mouse and keyboard, this is PC, and it's an experience that I've never really had before in a first-person shooter, and it's a hell of a lot of fun. Everything else pushed aside for a moment, this game is just so much fun, provided you find a squad to play in or an outfit to join. Again, I'm just going to reiterate that because it's so critically important to this game. It's just play with your friends, play with an outfit, because playing solo, while it's fun to just shoot some dudes, you kind of lose, over half of the game experience if you're not playing in an organised group. That's where the game really shines. And I'm pleading with everyone that watches this video, if you do pick up the game, find some friends to play with. It's the only way to play. So in closing, yeah, I'm having a hell of a lot of fun with this game. I'm really looking forward to what Sony's going to add to the game over there. Like, John Smedley keeps saying that he has a 10-year plan for Planetside, which is a really ambitious thing to say. 10 years is a really long time in game years. That's a really long time in game years. And I'm really excited about what they've got planned for this game. Just the other day I saw a picture tweeted by John Smedley of like what can only be described as an aircraft carrier, and if that's the kind of stuff they have planned for this, then holy hell, I want to be a part of it. It's going to be a hell of a lot of fun. So yeah, check out Planetside 2, guys. Planetside2.com. It's free to play. You don't need to pay a penny if you don't want to, although if you do enjoy the game, I would seriously suggest dropping some station cash on some upgrades. My name is Vindaz, and I will see you next time.